On this event in particular, is there anything that drew you to this? Anything that sort of brought you along to this? Any particular things you're hoping to hear from or see the panel discuss today, or was it just a general interest and coming back to the lunch club?
Well, a little bit of general interest, but it's always nice to see how people doing research. How much time do you spend doing new things? Like I remember back in the day, Google did a 20% time. So how are people doing it today?
Fantastic. Okay, I'm pretty sure that's going to be covered in depth. So good stuff. Pete, nice to see you again, mate. Been a while.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good. I finally have time to breathe.
Yeah, I saw going through the Slack group yesterday with all the WhatsApp and hitting a lot of different responses. How about today's event? Is there anything in particular that you're interested in about the session today, or just general interest?
General interest, but I'd love to see some of the research on how to combat some of the emerging cybersecurity issues with AI now automating phishing emails that are super tuned to the victim. So I find that's a very interesting topic.
Nice. Okay. John, again, been a while. How's it going, John Reed? I can see you there on camera. How about yourself for today?
Anything very well.
Good man, good man. Anything specific brought you along today?
Yeah, general, but also again to the points raised earlier, cybersecurity and that area particularly, it's very prevalent in the press given the JLR hack and so on. So yeah.
That in particular, fantastic. All right, well, we're about 21 there. So James, if you're okay, I'm gonna just call it there, and we'll start the actual event. So I think I recognise everyone in the audience. Might be one or two names I don't recognise. So if you don't know me, my name's Barry Cranford. I'm the organiser of the London CTOs, and it's good to be back. We've had about 6 weeks, I think, Chelsea, maybe six weeks, 2 months, something like that, away from the London CTOs Lunch Club, while we're trying to figure out the direction to go with it and what we wanted to do there. And so what we've started now is a new series of panel events that are going to be hosted by a member of the CTO Job Club, which is another group that we've got here. So if you're interested in hosting, you're interested in being on the panel, please do come along. We're going to also be sharing a document in the chat any minute now. There we go. Thanks, Charles. So you're welcome to use this as a chance to network, as a chance to meet other CTOs interested in this space. Like clearly you can see there with Pete and John, there's already a couple of people interested in the same spot. So the big thing that we're trying to do here is use these events to help people find other connections and people who have similar interests. This event is really meant to just start those conversations off and start those thoughts. And then obviously you can do that, connect through the doc to get to each other. Anyway, I will get out of the way at this point. I'll hand over to James. So thank you, James, for volunteering to do the first series, the first event in this series. Hope you all enjoy.
Thanks, Barry. My name's James Hall. I've been a director in the CTO, running development teams for about 20 years. So for the last 10 years, I've been running global teams, developing high reliability and safety critical IoT solutions in a range of industries. I'm currently doing some temporary fractional work, but if anyone is looking for someone to come and help them, please get in touch. And enough about me. What we're here to talk about today is, as Barry's mentioned, the balance of research and development. Whenever we're working in technology development, there's always a balance that we need to reach between research and development. First question, of course, is how we define research. Ask 10 tech leaders and you'll probably get 12 or 14 answers. But one of the questions that you have to answer is there any value to the research you're doing? If it isn't returning an immediate ROI, is it money down the drain? And what value does a pure research project give to an organization? There's the obvious one. You can get a patent on some bright idea, and that gives you the legal protection. So your great world-beating idea can't be copied by your competitors, which is great. But not every idea is going to lead to a patent. So if you're working it out in how you can apply a new technology and how that can be applied to your roadmap, that's a useful bit of research. And that can give you a competitive edge as well to help you build or maintain a market lead. Another thing to question is research a cost or an investment? Does the head start that researching a new technology gives you before embarking on a development project pay off in de-risking the development process? And to help me answer those questions, and no doubt a few more, I've got with me Claire Knight, who is the CTO of Salehouse, Nikhil Gupta, interim CTO at Valacera, and Andy Poles, co-founder at Incredible Software Limited. We were supposed to have Felipe Rodriguez, who's CTO at Loyalty Lion, but unfortunately he's unwell today, so he hasn't been able to join us. So, panel, would you like to all introduce yourselves?
I go first. Hello, I'm Andy. I'm a startup CTO. I've got several exits under my belt, and these days I'm doing freelance work.
I'll jump in next. I'm Claire. More from a VP engineering, software development side of the CTO world rather than the CIO side of things. The biggest focus over the years has been in the dev tools space. I'm gonna hand it over to Nikhil now.
Hi everyone, good to meet you. Here's my LinkedIn in chat now. I'm a scale-up CPTO. I've worked for enterprises and scale-up companies anywhere from 500 million to $3 billion of revenue. I am also a founder of my own business. I've built a couple of products that have been selling fairly well for the last few years. It's a lifestyle business fashion product, and I'm very passionate about everything to do with research and innovation and guided meandering of the untamed mind, as Amazon would put it. So very good to be on the panel today with all of you.
Well, thanks everybody. So we can dive into a few questions that I've got that I think we can discuss. If anyone's on the call wants to ask any other additional questions, feel free to drop something in the chat, and we can pick it up as we go through. So, the first question I suppose that we can discuss is how important you think that research projects are within your particular organisation, and how happy are you with the balance? Who wants to step in on that? Nikhil?
Oh, well, okay. Right on the spot. James, thanks for the question. I think research is very important, but before I answer that question any further, I think you started this conversation with a very apt question, which is how do you define research? So for me, I would, for the purpose of this conversation and the panel today, I would define research as attempt to solve an unsolved problem in the domain that's adjacent to your business or your interest. It may not be an immediate money spinner, but you're trying to solve a problem without overly worrying about the commercial aspects. And here, I found research to be fairly useful. There have been companies I've worked in which had very structured research time set aside. So companies like Amazon would give you a percentage of your time to go do whatever you want to do. They would call it learn and be curious time. Google had the famous 20% rule. But even in companies, smaller companies that I've worked in, I've seen leadership consciously recognizing the importance of research. And I've seen very tangible business benefits coming out of those research projects, leading to patents and commercially deployed products and solutions in actual customer lifecycle journey. So research is very important, but it depends on how do you phrase it within the ambit of an organization, and how do you safely create space for people to really sink their teeth in.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it is going to vary between businesses and types of businesses. What sort of level of focus you're going to need to put onto research. Anyone else got any comments on that?
Yep. I think it's contextual, and one of the key messages I think is it's not a bolt-on. So what I mean by that is you have to understand research from the kind of how important it is to the organization in question, and it doesn't live in a vacuum. It can't be outside of the business. So I always think of, when I was a CTO, I always thought of that the role was to work out what's the best tech and ops to make that business a success. And at that point in time, so it's very different. A startup is very different from a high growth SaaS company, for example, and some businesses are inherently research based and it's kind of baked into their DNA, and they report about it, they talk about it, they're mentioning it all the time. Other companies, doing fundamental research makes no sense at all, and you'll get, the board will be rather upset if you even propose it, kind of thing. And the warning I want to make is that I've seen it several times, that if you try and bolt it on and push it to the side, so a common example I've seen several times is someone thinks, oh, we're not innovating enough, we need it, oh, Y Combinator are good at this, we'll copy them, we'll have an innovation hub, an incubator, we'll shiv it over to one side. And then they, sometimes I've even heard them, oh, San Francisco, that's where all the good ideas are, we'll put it there, well away from everybody else in the business. And eventually it will get killed off in the next reorg, effectively, because it's just a vanity project by someone. That's just never going to work. It's got to be central to the business, and it's got to have some value and within context of what that business is trying to do.
Yeah, I have the same sort of view on that. I think that having research projects that your developers all work on, sort of taking it in turns, whoever's most appropriate, it gives them additional experience and skills that they build up, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I actually know there's a couple of references to the Google time. I know several people who work at Google who get quite annoyed by that, because I think they killed it off a long time ago, because they call it 110% time, because they're working the weekends too
Yeah.
on their core job. Never mind, they've got no time for anything else. Like, yeah. Anyway,
I wanted to sort of throw in there off the back of what Andy said as well. Is I think not only is the stage of business, but also what the leadership, be that founders or a board or whatever, are thinking about things, much to, not putting it off in a corner and forgetting about it. There's certain businesses who treat tech very much as only an operational enabler, not as an innovation center. And I think you need to figure out the appetite there and what type of business you're in as well, to kind of balance that research versus development. Because in those situations, you could do even some amazing research, even go and get patents and all sorts of things, but because it's not doing the things that people think it should be doing, there'll be a lot of pushback and even being seen as failure. So again, it's one where the CTO needs to put the business hat on as much as anything else, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, we've got a couple of questions that have come in on the chat while we've been talking, which are related to this, one from Olivia and another from John, which are kind of related about how much time you allocate to research, and where you draw the line with a time box for research, otherwise, to prevent research being an ongoing task with no outcome or value. I think that's again, there's no right and wrong answer. It depends on the organization, doesn't it? But the way I always work it, whenever I'm putting together a project plan, I always, nothing to do with Google, but I only ever allocate people at a maximum of 80%, because I figure the other 20%, they're either going to be making a cup of coffee in meetings that aren't related to a project, or thinking about some new idea that we can come up with. I generally find that works reasonably well. I don't know what everyone else, what your experiences are.
yeah, that matches mine too, actually. Although I was rude about the 20%, I kind of use 20% too.
I've been doing it since before I heard of Google doing it. That's my excuse.
Yeah, hypocrite in the corner here.
I think it depends upon how you position research in a company. You can either very consciously, and again, it goes back to what kind of stakeholders do you have, how does executive team feel about research, spending for people to dedicate their time to something that may not have a tangible outcome ever. But if you have a supportive executive team who appreciate this, you could very, very candidly and very upfront, in a very transparent manner, say, okay, we're going to block 10% of our time for our research. And you don't have to phrase it as research. You could phrase it as innovation or learning time. And that could be as simple as one sprint, 1 day per sprint, a sprint being like a 2 week period. So you could have very upfront and transparent conversations around, time boxing that. But some of the other things then, James, like what you said earlier was, I think padding the project estimates for teams to let their minds wander again. But it depends on the kind of ecosystem you're a part of and what support you have in the wider business around how do they view research is what I'll say.
Yeah, that's good question. Good points all around. We've got Olivia's on fire. He's got to come up with a. We've got another one here. How much freedom or power do you give your team to research properly? And do your teams also prepare or have skills for doing research? I think we've kind of covered that with the idea of making sure that people have got the ability to spend a bit of time researching things that they think might be useful, but equally you don't want people just going off and navel gazing. You need some sort of control. So if someone spends a few hours thinking about something and then maybe brings it to the rest of the organization and says, I've identified something I think we could spend a bit of time on, and then setting up an actual proper research project rather than just going off down a rabbit hole.
I can offer a framework if that helps, James. So there's freedom and power, but there's also guidance and direction that sometimes you need to give. So some of the best teams I've seen work around research or innovation or curiosity, they would spend 1 day a week sprint or some time around where they will say, okay, this is our learning time or research time. But say that day is the Friday, they would sit together on Thursday and they would lead the discussion between themselves on what kind of initiatives that they would take tomorrow, which is the next Friday. And they would help each other out around, okay, think through this, maybe do this, maybe not do that, maybe this is too wide field of a problem to solve in a day or even get your wrap your head around. So they would help each other come up with some ideas, some direction and sense. And following Monday, they would have a sense check between themselves. They will again bring together, they will again bring each other together and they will sense check on, so how did your Friday go? What did you actually do? Did you actually ended up doing the research or innovation, or were you sucked into project again? And I've seen in some of the autonomous and empowered organization, this was also a mechanism for the team to hold their management in check. So if someone from the team gets pulled into an urgent task, then the team could theoretically, and I've seen this happen, hold their management accountable, saying, well, this was supposed to be our time. You took that one person's time away. So you now need to compensate that person for that time by, giving some more time to them in the next sprint. But so the idea is self-governing, autonomous, empowered teams. Again, granted, it can't happen in every organization, but I've seen this happen in a number of organizations where teams sort of support each other in this journey.
There's another technique I've used in the past. If you're using sprints, I mean, these days I tend to be continuous integration and deployment, but if you've got sprints and you've got a 2-week sprint, often we've had what we call gold cards, and it rotates around people in the team. And when it comes to you, you've got like that period to do whatever you want on stuff. And people can experiment on things and do things. And that's worked out quite well. So, but the point is, it's got to rotate around and be different.
That's a good idea. I've not done that myself. How have you found that has been beneficial? Is it because people have then got that whole sprint?
Well, they may get in a bonnet about the project they're on. They want to do something, they haven't had time because there's too much pressure to deliver stuff, so they want to go off and do some stuff. And that isn't really research, I know, but that's just going off and doing some, like tidying up some stuff. But they might want to experiment with a different database architecture or a different thing, or try and work out different ways of getting more data into it, or whatever the key issues are around that particular project. So it seemed to work quite well.
Okay. Another question we've got is when it comes to sort of moving on, sort of segueing from what we've just been talking about into the next question. When it comes to people, do you think that involvement in research can help to motivate the team because it provides them new experiences, gives them new skills, but does that improve their morale and motivation? And because if you're working in research, by definition, you're working on something that no one has done before, or it wouldn't be research. I've found that it's quite good for people feeling they're gaining some new skills, and people feeling quite valued, that they're being given the flexibility to work on this exciting new technology that may or may not become the basis of our next product.
I think for me, that's where we need to understand the team. Much to the earlier question in the chat as well around, does your team have skills for doing the research? Well, what have I hired for is a question. But here I would say that I've had some really exceptional engineers who are great, where I give them a 90% blank canvas with the 10% guardrails, and that's what gives them joy, that's what keeps them motivated, that would keep them stay. But I've also had plenty of other engineers who are much more engaged actually by solving a customer problem or shipping a feature. So I think this is where you need to apply some of the people management skills, not just the technology angle or the stakeholder management. And talk to people, find out what excites them, and then, because I remember also going back quite a long time ago, I'm not going to list the number of years, but even as an engineer, they went, "Oh, here's a treat, you're going to be put on this project," and it was not a project that I was interested in, and I'm like, "Thank you very much," and they're like, "Oh, okay." Never thought of it like that, but so it was definitely a learning experience that I've taken through into my management career.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's no point putting someone onto a project that then they have no interest in. It's better to work, find out who's interested in that particular idea, and if possible, put them on there.
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, if the motivation for doing the research is for low morale, I think that's a fairly doomed strategy for getting people's morale better, really. Because I think if the morale's low, there's some fundamental things you need to fix elsewhere, I would have thought.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of it as a panacea for morale. It was more,
it too literally.
Hopefully your team is all happy and quiet.
Sorry,
but giving them that extra experience, picking up some new skills, it gives them that little boost when they get home from work at the end of the day, thinking, I learned something.
But I think you have to take into account that I think it was the CTO of NASA said, in engineering, surprises are bad. In research, surprises are good. And you might not get any outcomes. You might be doing research and nothing happens. You can't actually achieve anything, or you don't find anything, or nothing happens. So that could make them lower the morale even more, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. But then that's why you do the research, isn't it? Because
I know.
Because it kind of leads into the feasibility for a project. What can we do with this technology? I've run research projects where we found a technology that's really great, but from a practical point of view, it's not going to work, because yes, it'll solve all the technical problems, but it'll make the product uncompetitive, because you've got something you're supposed to be able to manufacture for $20, and the extra bits are going to cost an extra $60. So that those negatives are also quite useful, because if there is a new technology that's too expensive to use now, give it a few years and keep an eye on how the costs change. And another area that's quite we've got a question about is when it comes to things like AI, which everyone's talking about these days, everyone's doing. Would you research or run a research project into how your organization could best use AI, or do you tend to go with the flow, see what others are finding value with before you take the plunge? I mean, that could apply to any technology, but at the moment, AI is the one that everyone's using, looking at, figuring out new ways of applying. And do you become one of the leaders, or do you follow and let everyone else make the mistakes? Anyone got any answers to that one?
I don't know that I have an answer, but I would kind of throw out there that I'm seeing a lot of discussion on the various socials, not just LinkedIn, and things of some people trying 15 different tools, playing with this, trying this out, and what I call genuinely exploratory, I don't want to call it research, but exploratory, playing around. And then there's other people going, where we can't adopt this until we have a framework and we have to tick all these boxes. And I think it's so nascent at the moment, and it's changing so fast, faster than other tools that have been brought in, that I think if you want perfection, you are going to have to wait. But I think you also run the risk of being left behind here, and that I've worked with a lot of US businesses as well as some UK ones, and again, this comes back to the risk appetite of the different businesses and the need for us to apparently have checklists in the UK for everything versus maybe not so much over there. But I do think that's a factor that should be taken into account right now. Don't get left behind. Don't get a shadow IT running in your business, but don't go so far that you kind of lock it down so nobody's going to be prepared to play and innovate. It's a fine line at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, the tools are evolving so rapidly at the moment that by the time you finish researching into whether you're going to use something, that's going to be obsolete and something else has moved on. So a lot of the work I've been doing has involved making sure that there's some sort of an abstraction layer and this flexibility, so that you're looking at one tool, but you can easily switch to another when something better comes along, which at the rate things are going, it's probably going to be next Tuesday. Yeah.
It's what you said, Claire, is spot on about shadow IT and not letting that take over. But specifically with AI, I am also finding there's a lot of fear-driven experimentation, which can really stretch an organization into multiple directions and create those shadow IT things. So when I joined a company as a CPTO, and incidentally, I was speaking about this on a podcast yesterday, I inherited 3 running AI initiatives. One significantly funded with one of the biggest customers of that company, actually. So it was a co-funded initiative. And within the first few months after analyzing those initiatives, I was very clear that we need to kill 2 of these and really focus on just one. And I worked with the teams. We went through the motions. We decided to kill the 2, and we did kill the 2. In the long term, decision was proven right. Not invest in those 2 and kill them. The third one that we focused on, we took it to production. We filed a patent. We got the patent. So we had a great success story coming back, and the board really loved that. And again, all 3 of these initiatives came out of like the need to do research and people's innate curiosity and a management that supported those. But at the same time, we were investing heavily in all 3 of them, and losing sort of ROI on that investment without any line of sight of what does that mean for us. So it's also important to understand what to not do with AI as you inherit sort of programs, as important as it is to figure out what to do with AI. And I found similar pattern in the next organization that I joined. Similar story, couple of AI initiatives running, fragmented, taking investments, no clear path to production, no ROI. Again, similar conversations. Decided to pause one, decided to invest completely in the other, brought that over the line. So with AI, the dilution of focus is very, very real, and that's where I would urge all the leaders to be really on top of. Are my teams chasing AI because there's a fear of missing out, or are we doing something that we believe that AI could genuinely help us with?
I think it's very true. I've seen there's a lot of, I think a lot of companies are feeling quite vulnerable at the moment, and therefore the boards are putting pressure on technology to come up with things. And I think typically you tend to look at 2 aspects of that. You'd look at how does AI impact our product, and also does it impact the ops side of the business? And you can look at both of those. And I think there's going to be more and more pressure on companies to do that. And you can actually do AI on the product. If you're a data company, for example, you can look at your data. Is your data special, not public, and therefore you can make that the ordinary LLMs haven't got access to, therefore you can train them slightly differently, maybe. Or if you do some research, you might find that it's not really an LLM problem, it's a different sort of problem, and you can try different ideas out. And I think on the ops side, there's loads of things you can do now to make things more efficient, and you should be looking at projects where you can help people be faster, do more, and do things they couldn't actually do before. So I think there's going to be an awful lot of pressure on CTOs to start doing this more.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, and it comes back to the point that we made earlier, that there's no right and wrong answer, is there, to any of this?
Nope.
Got another question coming from John, who appears to have been reading my crib notes, because he's asked a question that we've got on the list about how we balance research against business pressures, expectations, particularly in small, high-performing engineering teams. My experience of that is you really have to cut your cloth depending on how much resource there is available. When it comes to how you present a project, any kind of project, to the board, you've got to talk about the ROI and how long it's going to be before it pays off, and as Andy said earlier, that you have to accept that you might do a research project that costs quite a lot of money, and at the end of it the answer is this isn't going to work. So have you flushed the money down the toilet, or has it been of benefit? So when it comes to that balance, you really need to look at what the potential rewards are going to be in the longer term, don't you? I don't know what anyone else's views are.
I think from my side, it's possibly a couple of controversial statements. Let's mix it up. It's Friday lunchtime, folks. It's
plenty.
Yeah. One is that I find what I call really high performing teams a lot rarer than people think they are. And in those teams, there's often a lot of individual drive to keep making the product better in one way or another, which can lead to aspects of innovation and research just because they care alongside the work they're doing. In small teams, which is the other part of that question, I think then you have to ask the business what they really care about. And obviously, early stage, needing to get PMF, then you need some product features out and things. But once you've gone beyond that, I think the question to maybe ask some of the stakeholders is, what's the ROI of not doing this research? Which is like flip it on its head. Are we going to be forever playing catch up, or do we think that with what we have now, we're great for the next 5 years, or are we only great for the next 1 year, 2 year? Do we need to be thinking along those time horizons and trying to get input from across the business again? I know I'm talking outside of tech again, but I think that is a really useful kind of exercise to do, the thought exercise of not doing things as much as doing them.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. I was talking to an organisation not so long ago, and they, a leader in their market, but they, over the last few years, they've been concentrating more and more on how great their current products are. And they used to do lots of research. They had patents every couple of years. They'd have every year or so they'd have a patent coming out. They haven't done anything like that, and their CEO was concerned that they've got the market lead, but other people have actually got products which objectively are better than theirs. And the reason that they've still got the market lead is to a large extent inertia, because, well, we've always gone with this company because they're the best. And it doesn't take long before someone says, well, actually, I really like that funky, feature that your competitors have got. And if you aren't, if you're not moving forward, effectively you're going backwards, aren't you? And that's quite a tricky discussion to have, because it's very difficult to quantify. How much is your market reputation worth? That the fact that you're the market leader. It's easy to say, well, if we lost 10% of our market share, it would cost us X million pounds a year. But you can't really quantify it all that easily, can you?
No, and especially you can't really directly attribute it to the result of research, that if you invest in research, then we won't lose. It's like trying to prove a negative, which is always a hard problem to sort of take on. So yeah, I think trying to firmly position research as a directly tangible ROI driven sort of investment is probably a losing battle. The Claire's point, it's a Friday afternoon, so I'm also choosing my words very flippantly, because I won't do that. If you invest $100,000 here, then I'll give you $1 million back. Well, yeah, probably not.
Yeah, and also, a research development project is going to pay off, well, not quite tomorrow, but in the relatively short term, or at least you're going to see the returns coming in. Whereas a research project, you're doing the research and then you've got to work out how you can put that into a product or a solution, and then you've got to develop that thing. So you could be 2, 3, 5 years down the line before you actually get any return on that research investment.
And maybe never. So I suspect most of the research projects actually fail, or they take on a completely different form. So I mean, look at Google Glass. Google was first to come up with Google Glass, what, 6, 7 years ago now, and they were retailing it for $1,500 back then, or $2,000, something like that. And then that disappeared, even though Google were the pioneers of that technology. And now the world is only talking about Ray-Ban Meta, which is inspired from that probably same concept and maybe built on some of those patents, but completely different products. And Google probably made no ROI on that research project. So I suspect most of the research projects actually don't see the light of the day.
Yeah, and all those people who invested in their Google glasses, they ended up with an expensive novelty paperweight, didn't they, when they turned all the system off? But again, that the point you're making there, Nikhil, that they were, someone has to be the leader. They were obviously ahead of their time, and I think, from my point of view, looking at it, they were developing a product based on a technology that didn't actually exist at the time. So there's a lot of hype and smoke and mirrors, but there wasn't actually a working technology. If they were doing it now, they'd be in quite a crowded marketplace, wouldn't they? Another question, again, to do with the costs and the investment is, do your organisations make use of R&D tax credits or patent box at all? I know that the rules around R&D tax credits changed a year or so ago, so it's slightly more fuzzy than it used to be. But is that something that you actively use? Because you can actually get money back from the government, which is a bit of a novelty.
Yeah, we did that back both when I was at Amazon and at THE. So there was, but this is a fairly involved exercise, and there's a lot of audit and scrutiny on it now. So I think in theory, yeah, if you can get it done, then this is good money back, especially around your research and development. And by the way, those laws define research and development slightly more generously than most companies define research and development, right? But the process and the mechanism to get to that grant is really convoluted now. So I would suggest doing that with utmost caution. It is a resource intensive exercise. It is a resource intensive exercise, absolutely. And the success rates are now low. And there's a lot of audit by HMRC. I've been a part of one of those audits previously. So it's a resource intensive exercise.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was my experience.
Yeah.
There's a lot more scrutiny now on them, which is probably justifiable, because some of the things that people were putting through was a bit dubious, to say the least.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the problem, that you end up, if you have a few people who are taking advantage, then they end up having to tighten up the rules, and it catches everybody out, doesn't it?
Yeah, and one of the things I've seen several times, it happened to us a little bit as well, is that because it's normally finance that are doing the paperwork with the tax returns and getting the credits, the Inland Revenue are putting it on them to prove things, and then they push bureaucracy back to the tech people. So they kind of want timesheets, sort of micromanaged timesheets of all the different little bits and pieces, which is a lot of friction, a lot of pain, and a lot of bureaucracy. So we had to find a way of collecting the data without bureaucracy, without all that pain and stuff, which was itself painful.
Yeah, as I say, years ago, you could just say, this is how much our R&D cost was, and this percentage of it. And but I mean, I find there are the tools available, because if you're using things like Jira, and people are using that effectively, you can actually quite easily run a report and say, okay, well, 20% of our effort was on these projects, which are research projects, and therefore that's exactly how much it was.
That's how we did it. We did
got
it
that audit trail.
Based on the commits and that kind of thing. Yeah.
I completely agree with Andy. The bureaucracy of timesheet management and all that is a massive pain. And equally, in that same conversation, Andy, as you rightly said, it's usually finance doing the paperwork. So, they are sitting down with you and the teams, and then they would bring in auditors. Now, I found that there's also a problem of a shared language that is understood both by the technology teams and the finance professionals, because often technology teams will be speaking highly engineered language, especially if you are talking about R&D, then the words become very heavy, and they usually don't cut the mustard with sort of finance professional backgrounds. So you constantly are in that stress point of how do I explain this really complicated topic in a simplified word to a non-technology person? And so I found that a lot of time we were just coming around with shared language that both sides understand.
Yeah.
So we can actually get that done. In addition to the whole timesheet management and the bureaucracy that Andy mentioned.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so shall we open up the discussion to some of our guests? If anyone, you've heard what we've been talking about, and we've obviously had some really good questions from the floor. But has anyone like to share their experiences? You can either raise your hand or just dive on in. It's entirely up to you. Yeah, Olivier.
Yes, yeah, hello there. Yeah, I just put two questions actually that might be related, but just got plenty of questions, but I'll start with these two. Do you have in your, from your past experience, do you have any, can you give any examples of, how long it took for you to put an idea, so just coming out of a successful research project and put it on the market? So that's one question. And the second question is, how did you introduce it to the customers? Hosting, A/B test, something like this, communications, whatever. So,
well, from my point of view, it really depends on how complicated the research was. Some things you spend a few months looking at a new technology, and it's quite quick to implement that into a product for your customers. When it comes to introducing it to customers, if you've got some sort of a USP that research gives you, then obviously your marketing department has to come up with a fancy name for it. And the introduction is to do with, we've got this product and it does something that no one else's does. It's more accurate, or it's more cost effective, or it's just more effective. So I don't think, I've never sort of developed something based on a research project and given the customers all the nitty gritty of exactly why it's better. So I leave that down to the branding and marketing people. Anyone else got any experience on that?
Yeah, so the one product that I mentioned where we filed a patent after killing the two other initiatives, it took the company nearly 2.5 years to get to production from the moment the idea was formed and someone started looking at it and the small research group was formed. So it was about 2.5 years at that point before we could get that product deployed. Now, this was a product which was in the production flow, so this was not directly customer facing. The impact was customer facing. So before the solution, customers would wait 16 to 24 hours for one of the manual steps to take over, which this process automated. But because it's such a back-end driven process, we could sort of put it in our production flows and monitor the quality. Some of the other research projects that I've worked on, the research was more on the side of customer problem and business value proposition and not technology. There we were able to sort of deploy fairly quickly within a period of months. Some of them backfired pretty bad because the business research was not nice, or we got the customer experience wrong, or the customer expectation wrong. But those kind of projects are sort of quick to get out of the ground, versus those where you don't have a identified technology stack defined, where the technology is what you're researching. Similar experience with the other AI initiative that I mentioned, which we deployed in my last company. That also took roughly 20 months or so from idea to sort of inception and product deployment, because again, AI driven, very, very complicated problem to solve. So those tend to have longer gestation period and cycles.
I think one of the important things is when you're doing research is to realize it's different and it's not a continuum. So you don't just do research and, oh great, now we'll just stick it into the dev and off we go again. It's kind of, because research is, can we do something? And then the development is actually, how do we do it properly, kind of stuff. That's why it takes so long typically to get these things out, right?
Let me share one thing. Actually, Andy, you're spot on. That jogged my memory around one point that I want to share with the group. Usually research exactly starts how Andy said, can we solve the problem? Like, it's exciting, it's a difficult problem to solve, can we solve it? And you solve the problem. And at that point, business takes notice, which is, oh, you've solved the problem. Great. How soon can we have this in production?
Yeah.
And that's the battle, which is, but we just have a proof of concept. It's not even an MVP yet. The technology won't scale. It will only work in this particular, if you sneeze around, it'll break. And the business goes, no, you've had your time. We gave you the time. You've proven, you're genius, your research worked, you have a solution, put it in production. And that's a different battle now, but this is a POC. It's not even an MVP. It will never scale. And then you're a bit of a victim of your own success. So it's important as leaders, as you see the first green shoots of success coming out, it's important as leaders to go and set the expectations very clearly with your stakeholders from that point onwards. Don't create a huge excitement. Don't pat your own backs too loudly, because what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for a very hard problem in very short future. So that's something, Andy, and thank you for volunteering that.
All
Andy,
right, I've been there too.
yeah. Painful lessons there.
I think we've all seen that. The CEO says, well, I've seen it working. You always need to make sure it's got lots of bits of wire hanging out of it and it doesn't look anything like a product. But yeah, that is a tricky one, isn't it? Because once they've seen it working, well, I want it in the shop for Christmas. Yeah. Anyone else that want to step in here?
There's some questions in the chat, James.
Oh, right. Has anyone had to, this is from John Clark, has anyone had to convince their CEO that their goals require fundamental changes to how the technology operates? Do you want to flesh that out a little bit more there, John?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about a case years ago in my career where the CSO and the science officer co-founders were really needed to achieve a specific goal with the technology, and we just weren't quite there. And the team was getting demoralized, banging away at the same techniques, trying to make it work, just not happening. And really we needed to do something different. But they weren't willing or perhaps able to countenance that. So I'm just wondering how people handle that tricky situation where there's intense pressure on research, but actually it's time to pivot in some way. I mean, yeah. So I'm just interested in people's experiences there.
Anyone got any comments on that one? I would say I've not been such a fundamental shit hitting the fan situation as that. But anyone else? Yeah, it looks like it was just you then, John.
Okay, well, that sucks. Well, it was tough because it was
how did you sort it out then?
And we had a pure software solution for locating cell phones, and it just wasn't quite as accurate as GPS chips. And when they founded the company, they said GPS chips will never get cheap. So, and that's why CPS, Cambridge Positioning Systems, is no more.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
actually, what you mentioned there does remind me of actually a very similar thing. An organisation I was working with a couple of years ago, they were using GPS for outdoor location finding, and it wasn't quite good enough. So they identified a a new device that used dual frequency GPS and various other techniques that they thought was going to be great, and started designing it into their product, one of their existing products for their next version. And when I came along and had a look at it, theoretically it would give them an improvement, except they weren't using it properly, and it was going to add $160 to their BOM cost for a product that it was about $200 currently. So yeah, that was a similar sort of thing. That, everyone was getting really excited, and they hadn't noticed that. I think when they looked at it, they thought it was $16 and not 160 or something, whatever it was.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. Ouch.
So yeah,
okay.
we have to go back and say actually there are other ways of improving your location finding. But anyway, yeah.
I think it's very hard. That's very hard for founders to let go of the idea, and unfortunately, so most startups fail because of that. But
Yeah,
I don't think you're alone. I don't think you're alone, but I don't think there's much you can do if you're in that place, unfortunately.
And not just startups. Have you heard of this company, a small little company called BlackBerry? It's kind of or Nokia, maybe.
I used to work at BlackBerry.
I still got Nokia.
It's
And does Google own all the patents now from Nokia and BlackBerry?
from Motorola. They bought Motorola.
Motorola. Okay.
They bought. Microsoft bought Nokia, I think, and BlackBerry still lives to fight another day. But I think Google bought Motorola. Hey, research paid $1.1 million at the end. That's what Motorola's patent were collectively worth, right? That's what Google paid for them.
Okay, Tony, you've got a question here about balancing research and development. Do you want to pop in and
sure. I'll just read what I've typed. I suppose when any tech initiative, be it mature company, be it R&D, be it startup, be it whoever, tech debt is always a heavyweight hanging around the dev neck, so to speak. When it comes to R&D, is documentation important, or does the MVP you're getting to market or launching become more critical, and then it becomes again a tech debt issue that's dealt with further down the chain?
Can I ask you a question? What is it about documentation you feel is important? I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just asking why.
No, well, quite often I suppose the basics of the definition of tech debt is that stuff's been developed, coded, launched, etc., and nothing's been documented, so nobody knows who owns it and how it was developed and so forth, and it's then left to some poor souls that have to run and manage it. So I suppose I'm just taking it from the traditional definition of tech debt and documentation.
Okay, that's interesting. When I've done research type projects, there's a couple of things I like. I like demos. I like people reporting what they've done, even if they haven't managed to do things, which is as we're hearing with research. So I like regular demos, and so if it's a software kind of research project, we often do it on a separate repo or whatever, or something separate, and there's a README. It tells you what it is, tells you the context, and if you can run it, we have, I don't know, something like you can run it in Python or look at whatever your thing is. We've got a notebook and you can run it and you can do demos, you can see things. If it's like a financial financial model or something, you can run it and show things. If it's exploring database technologies and different things and trying to get load better, you can produce graphs and things of what's happening. So someone should be able to come and look at it. So it's almost like it should be self-documenting in a kind of way, if you know what I mean. That makes sense. Maybe I'm answering a different question. I don't know. Maybe
I was going to say.
No, it does. Well, I suppose I'm also putting my sort of kind of academic hat on here as well from documentation. So I suppose if you say you're doing PhD, you will be documenting, writing papers on whatever you're researching. I suppose you're taking a similar approach if it's pure research, but then I suppose you can push to GitHub and so forth. So there is traces of documentation that will exist.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of demos, so you can see things working and have it.
Oh no, of course, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's how you sell it.
Well, not just that. Yeah, well, that as well. Yeah, yeah. Sell it internally. Yeah, exactly.
To follow on from that, based on your question here of, is it the MVP? Is it the going live? When we've taken things from, say, hackathons to production, or even actually product-driven features to production, there's a deployment readiness, there's production readiness that we assess things on. And part of that is there a run book for operating this? Is there somebody to own this once it's in production? And unless they're both checked, it doesn't hit production. I'm well aware there are certain scenarios where the CEO demands something goes live without those things. At that point, you volunteer a team, in my experience. But again, it's thinking about things like that. Was it you, Andy? Somebody was saying earlier about there's the research side of it, and then there's making that good and proper and putting it into production. And I do think they're kind of separate steps, and you kind of think about them a little bit differently. And as somebody that has done a PhD in terms of what I document there versus what I do or have teams do in industry, I find them quite different in terms of the documentation or what you care about documenting.
No, I agree. I think I'm just maybe sort of maybe it's probably about 10 or 15 years old, sort of experience of working with a customer where you're sort of developing a POC or a pilot, which then suddenly becomes production, and who pressed the, sort of the go button on that, and who's supporting it. So it's probably just that historical nightmare that is creeping, reminding me.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. It looks like we're just about out of time. So I'd just like to sort of quickly wind up by, first of all, thanking our panelists, Claire, Nikhil and Andy, for all their insight, and also obviously for thanking all of you for coming in and joining, providing additional questions, and hopefully we've all learned something. I know I've picked up a few useful points. So thank you very much. Back to you, Barry.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Thank you so much, panelists. That was superb. And again, as James said, thanks to everyone for being here. I don't think we've had a time where we've got to 158 and we're still at 25 people. So everyone that signed up is still here. Yeah, really interesting conversation. I'm just going to again drop the link there so you've got that. Please open it now. If you can see that, open it. Again, just to reiterate, if anyone joined afterwards, the whole point of these events is to start conversations, to start connections, relationships, and that kind of thing. Everyone that's here is brought together because you all share an interest in this topic. So if anyone said anything, if you want to connect or go further with any of the questions in the chat or anything that anyone said, then please do. We're going to be back same time. In fact, no, we're going to be back an hour later next week on the follow-up, which is around AI and whether it's a productivity gain or a mirage. And that should be fun. So you're welcome to come back to that. There is a link on that document further down to join the Lunch Club or the CTO Job Club WhatsApp groups. Please join there, and feel free to connect with me if you can't access anything, you want to speak, you want to be a panelist, or you want to know anything else more about what we're doing. But again, just to reiterate, thank you so much to Andy, to Claire, and to Nikhil, and of course to James for running today. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a good weekend.